Hello, Pensacola. I'm Colonel Eric W. Shorter, and I'm currently running for mayor. I'm here with one of my team members, retired Colonel Dan Bartlett, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to allow Dan to tell you a little bit about himself. I'm a true son of Pensacola, Florida. My first grandfather is Judge L. Martin, the first community director for Head Start program, and my second grandfather is Abraham Pierce, a small business owner here in the Belmont de Villas area, the owner of Abe's 506. I believe that Pensacola is a world-class city, and I want to bring Pensacola to it. Pensacola, we have an opportunity. We have a chance. I'm certain that under my leadership, that we can begin to bring jobs into Pensacola and make Pensacola a great place for everyone to live. Dan?
Well, to tell a little about myself, so unlike Eric here, my wife and I both are refugees to Pensacola. Like so many, we were both Navy brats. Her father was in the Navy and my father was in the Navy, both long careers, and they both ended up settling here, which is where we met. We went to high school. We both went to Escambia High School. And then we went to, I graduated from the University of West Florida. She graduated from PJC back when it was still Pensacola Junior College. And then shortly after, I joined the military. I was in the infantry in the Army. And then she and I spent 30 years traveling around the world, going to bases overseas. I went on many, many deployments. And my wife is a registered nurse, and so she did that along with me in those many different locations. And then when we came time to retire, we're like, we need to go home. We need to go to Pensacola. And so that is where we are now. And now we own land here up in Molino, just right up north of Pensacola. And we've decided to stay here and retire. Our 4 kids are all adults. They are all off, married and on their own and doing their own thing. So we're here. I've recently retired from the military, and I'm here, and I'm here to help.
Ready to serve.
Ready to serve.
Well, Dan, that's great. So, Dan, what I would like to do is I'd like to get into my core 4 initiatives that I'd like to see us as we try to move Pensacola forward. I'd like to talk about vertical economic initiatives. I'd like to address affordability. I'd like to address neighborhood revitalization and education reformation. So, Dan, let's talk a little bit about vertical economic initiatives. You and I both know, based on our military experience, that the Port of Pensacola is a viable and economic tool. Tell me what you know that we could do with that port that has not been done.
So the other part of my career, the majority of my career, I spent as a strategic logistician in strategic transportation. And in those, we worked with a lot of different organizations worldwide, but especially here in the United States is the National Defense Transportation Association, the NDTA. And what the NDTA does is it brings all of the ports, the railroads, the trucks, the trains, the planes. It brings all of these different folks together from all the walks of life and presents the requirements of both the Department of Defense and the United States, but then also the economy of the United States at large. And one of their big initiatives is a defense initiative in order to make auxiliary ports to the current standing military and large-scale ports that the military uses to deploy the military and to also ship goods overseas, which is a huge lifeline, because when you think of places like, just for example, the recent events going on, that takes a huge supply line. It takes thousands of tons of food, thousands of tons of munitions, thousands of tons of parts, all have to be shipped overseas and have to go there constantly. We're talking thousands and thousands of containers a month.
Yep. Shipping
overseas all over the world, in the Pacific, in the Middle East, everywhere, in order for things to happen. So these auxiliary ports are used as a launch pad either to launch deployments out or to ship goods out or even to build shipping sometimes. And the NDTA has hosted MARAD and other organizations for the US government who have money in the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars available in order to turn smaller ports here in the United States into auxiliary ports for that specific purpose, provided you have a plan and you put forth the money to get a grant in order to be able to do that operation.
So beyond a shadow of a doubt, we could utilize that port to create an economic lifeline for Pensacola. Currently, the current mayor is talking about bringing in Burdon, but I say that that is just the tip of the iceberg. We have a chance that we could do storage And if we built storage, we acquired some additional land, et cetera, maybe we could establish additional shipping lines, maybe with Saudi. I'm not sure. I mean, but I'm thinking that beyond a shadow of a doubt, that is one of the things that we could do.
Yes, I've seen ports all over the world, even in advanced industrial countries like Europe. A lot of times they make as much money from the storage as they do from the port itself.
That's what I needed to hear. So you and I both know currently that the port is self-sustaining. However, the city has maintained oversight of the port. Basically, I consider it to be a stranglehold. So listen, I'm gonna move on to our next initiative, Dan, affordable housing. My thought process is that when I think about affordable housing, I think that affordable housing starts at $200,000. And what I'd like to see is I'd like to see us look at areas like Brownsville, where we could come in and maybe create a multi-use sort of area. You know, you've been in New Orleans, so you know what I'm talking about, how there could be a coffee shop on one corner, on the next corner there might be a bakery, around the corner there might be the best barbecue ribs you've ever eaten in your entire life. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to utilize grant money to come in and fix up the homes of the current residents that are there, and that with the vacant lots that are out there, if they're not owned currently by Habitat for Humanity, I like to use those lots to build affordable houses. And I know that it is possible. I know that there are builders that would build, I don't know, maybe between $100 to $125 a square foot. I mean, I realize that may have changed because some of the prices have changed with the current market, but I do think that that is certainly possible. Are there any other things that we could do, Dan, that you can think of that might help us to address that issue with the affordability and housing?
So with the housing affordability, I've seen in a lot of communities in Europe and in other countries throughout the world, in places like New Orleans, so there's a handful of places in the United States that are similar, where people live, the businesses they work at, and also the things that they need, like grocery stores and bakeries and going to the doctor's appointment, and they're all integrated. So the way we currently do our zoning is you have farmers who live far up and away, and then you have high density and low density residential houses that are over here, and then you have a commercial area where you have to go in order to be able to do these commercial things. Right. And then you have large box stores that are in another area. And so every single thing you do requires that the taxpayer has to first build a road for you to get there, because there's absolutely nothing integrated. Yes. You can't live in a neighborhood of 3,000 people, a wraparound neighborhood, and you can't even walk down the street and buy a gallon of milk. You have to get in your car and you have to drive there, which creates an insane price on the taxpayer. Whereas if we integrated our neighborhoods and we integrated our zoning, then you could have business districts and living districts better connected. Whenever you built a large business or whenever you renovated a big building downtown and you ensured that there were apartments built above it, then you would have a foot traffic that would always be there, and it would lower the cost of living because you would not have to constantly keep building additional roads and additional methods for people to get to the things that they need daily versus living amongst them and having a core base working population that also purchases and works in the same place.
Dan, I agree 100%. I will tell you, as I've been out and about pounding the pavement, doing what I call tell me what you know, I've discovered that there are quite a few people that are interested in walkability and how we bring that about to this city. And I think that Brownsville would be a great, proof of concept project in that area to bring this vision that I have into fruition. So that way we could start to change the lives of Pensacolians. And so I tell you one of the other things I wanted to look at, Dan, I start talking about neighborhood revitalization. And when I talk about a neighborhood revitalization, I'm aware that there are neighborhoods in Pensacola at this very moment that do not have sidewalks, that do not have streetlights. I mean, that do not have parks. These are very simple things that we could do or implement that could certainly improve the quality of life of all of Pensacola residents. And I'm of the opinion that, we need to look beyond downtown. There are areas like Warrenton, Myrtle Grove, Shantytown, Brownsville. Everyone deserves an opportunity. Everyone deserves to be seen, and we can certainly do that. What are your thoughts, Dan?
So walkability is a huge thing, especially for the current generation coming up. They want to be able to leave their house, go and walk and do the things they need to do, and then be able to walk home again without having to get into a car every single time. And one of the things people look at before they move someplace is it's not just the schools and if there's employment available, but also when you're walking down your street at night, does the street have a sidewalk? Does the street have a street light? When you go to build a house, so let's say you find a small parcel in a neighborhood, an older established neighborhood that we're trying to keep and we're trying to keep vital. Well, what does that look like? Well, now when you go out there right now, the vast majority of the people who claim themselves to be part of Pensacola, they live outside the city limit, and despite having a massive county and city budget for requirements, there are people like some of my own family members who have lived here for over 40 years. Houses have been there for 50, 60 years. They still don't have a sewer line. And they live literally minutes from downtown. So how am I supposed to get investors to come here and say, yes, I want to move to Pensacola, and yet they come to a street that hasn't been updated since the 1970s, has no street light, there's no sewer line. I mean, these are not big advances. These are common conveniences. Has no sidewalk, and you also can't actually walk from there to anywhere else in order to, like I said, buy a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread.
Groceries or anything of that sort. I'm going to veer off course for just a moment before I get into education reformation. Here's one of the things I was thinking, which made me start thinking about parking. Now, I've addressed this issue, and I've been around, and I did a little video talking about parking, and we know that currently we have free parking, and that moratorium will end, I believe, in October. I think that mayor addressed that in a debate that I had gone to, and now it's going to be the possibility that people could purchase a pass of some sort, or senior citizens wouldn't have to pay. I'm not really sure of all of the details at this moment, but I still think it's got some issues. With that being said, so Dan, how do we solve this problem with the parking? Because it's my understanding this isn't the mayor's issue.
So I recently saw a debate with the mayor on a television program, and he was discussing this, and he was saying, oh, the majority of the parking isn't really the city's problem because the parking has the blue spaces, and right now those are free, and so if you have a problem or if someone emails you a citation, it's not really enforceable because they're all from these different companies, especially from downtown New Orleans.
Oh, wait a minute. From downtown New Orleans?
Right. So for some reason, there's all these private owners in other cities who could determine where you could park and how much you pay for it. So that was another issue. So there was a lot of deflection in that debate where the mayor was like, oh, the city's doing what it can, but it's all these other private industries, we can't control that. But I thought to myself, well, if you have an ordinance that allows them to sell parking, you could have an ordinance that says they aren't allowed to charge it any more than the city does.
Bingo. And that would change things as a whole. Because I can assure you, if they couldn't charge any more than the city did, I would think that those people would sell that parking beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yes.
I will tell you one of the things that as I started talking about neighborhood revitalization, I've been thinking about the current Civic Center, and I'd like to move the current Civic Center down to North Palafox and have it create a convention center over there. And so I've been over there kind of scouting out the property, trying to see if there's a large enough footprint that we could possibly put a convention center. Because if we could do that, I'm thinking about the different types of jobs that we could potentially bring into Pensacola once we start to bring those conventions in and things of that nature.
Yes, and the foot traffic. I mean, we've had some good downtown revitalization, which is a great thing for Pensacola. Mm-hmm. But then you still need to create that foot traffic. And on those events, I could tell you, having lived places like New Orleans and St. Louis and DC, all these other different places, when you can create an easy avenue for people to go to the event, and then they have time to walk about in your downtown, that's millions and millions of dollars of money being spent that you then get to reap the taxes from as a city to make your improvements, but also to help out all the many business owners that are directly in that local area.
Absolutely, because I tell you, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see that area have a convention center and then take some of those buildings in that area and create an Art Deco area. I mean, there's so much that we could do in Pensacola, if you have the vision, if you've been somewhere, if you've seen some different things. So let's move on to my final point, which was education reformation. And when I talk about education reformation, here's my thought process. We all know our kids or our grandkids, and you know whether or not your son or your daughter are going to go on to college. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a clear path to make sure that if your kids are not going to go on to college, that they graduate and they graduate with one of the trades. It would be great if your kid graduated as an electrical apprentice or a welder or a plumber apprentice or a HVAC technician, something of that sort. Maybe a a cosmetologist, if you will. And I tell you what I'd like to do. They're currently tearing down the old Baptist hospital over there, and right now there's a lot of back and forth with what should be done with that property. I'd like to see some labs being built over there where we could actually train those children, where we would train those young adults in order to be able to acquire the skill set that we're talking about. And when I'm thinking about it, you know, we could put up another park, we could, you know, do things of that sort, or we could make them viable citizens. So what do you think about that?
Well, a lot of times when people talk about doing development for kids, they stop very short and they say simple things like, oh, we're going to build a basketball court and, you know, we'll have some after school things. And you're right, in the long term, starting a long time ago, probably as far as back in the 1970s, it started to tell people, oh, your kids have to go to college, your kids have to go to college. And the truth of the matter is that people who come out of the trade schools, who learn about computers, who learn about electronics, who build engines, I mean, the amount a marine diesel mechanic makes or a welder for a ship makes is incredible compared to what your average college graduate gets.
Yes, sir.
And so there seems to be some sort of shame attached to, well, your kid's not going to go to college, and that should be absolutely the opposite. Kids should be able to go to high school. The last 2 years, I remember when we were here a very long time ago, vocational school was a good thing, and there was a large connection between the high schools and Pensacola Junior College where you could go and you could do some of these things. And I think the investment definitely, I agree with you 100%, the investment needs to be made where when kids go to high school, in their last couple of years especially, they can do the vocation in the school. There are after-school programs that they could go to where they could learn lab tech, they could learn computers, they could learn diesel mechanics, they could learn how to work on an electrical board. And then when they come to graduate, they spend a short amount of time in a vocational school or as a journeyman and apprentice, and now they're making an actual living. You know?
Absolutely. Well, you know, that's been my thought. I'd love to see them graduate, and you're not worried about what your son or your daughter are going to do. You know that they've got a viable skill, they're able to support themselves, so whether they stay here in Pensacola or whether they move and go somewhere else, you know that they're going to be okay. I tell people all the time that we do different things in life, and we often change careers more than once. So I think that if we invest in that education reformation, build these labs, and present that opportunity, that would be great. I think a lot of people will say, oh, well, you know, we've got George Stone. We do have George Stone, but the problem with George Stone is currently located so far out that if you don't have a car and you have to take ECAT, it would take you 4 hours to get out there on the bus, whereas this is centrally located. And you know, you can get your aunt, your cousin, you can catch the bus, you could get over to that area and you know, you would be okay. I tell you something else I'd like to see, Dan. I'd like to see us create a medical corridor along Davis Highway. Why not go out to University Mall? You remember the old University Mall? Mm-hmm. We have a chance. Why wouldn't we bring in outlets? Listen, Foley's got outlets. You know, Bay Minette over in Mississippi has got outlets. Why not Pensacola? I mean, why don't we create some additional things that would start to bring people into Pensacola? I'll tell you one of the things that I think has been on a lot of people's minds, and I'm going to breach over into this really quickly, is that we had the shooting on July the 4th downtown. And right now the mayor is currently set to impose a curfew in order to curtail these youngsters from being outside and being downtown. Okay, that's understandable without adult supervision. But I will tell you that having been in the military, such as yourself, we have had 18 to 26-year-olds that we've had to manage their time.
Right.
And you know what I think would be interesting? What about the USO that was over in Kuwait? What if we built something like that? I mean, think about it. The ECUA has got all of this land and property, and I'm thinking, surely we've got enough that if we partnered and had some integration and some collaboration and some synchronization with them, we could potentially build something of this sort, and we could work out, you know, the agreements or the financial part between the city and the county in order to make something like that come to life. Because, you know, back in the day, I used to roller skate, and I'm sure you probably used to roller skate, and they'd lock us in, but, you know, today's youth now are not being addressed. So I think that we need to do something more, is my thought process.
So I remember many years ago when I was still going to high school here, I actually joined the Youth Conservation Corps and worked over at Fort Pickens and worked on the forts that are near here. We have a ton of forts. We have a ton of history here. So if there were more programs like that, again, and those were summer jobs, but if you expanded it beyond just summer jobs, as we know from our time in the military and having dealt with young men and women, in the barracks, at times when a lot of things are going on, if they're bored, then they tend to get into trouble because they have a lot of energy and they just want to do something. So if you gave them an opportunity where they could do something, maybe earn minimum wage, go out and they could apprentice inside of people's office buildings down here. They could go work on the ports or the fort as part of all these various forts as part of the Youth Conservation Corps. They could go work down at the port. There's all kinds of things that the city needs done. There's always parks that need to be cleaned up. There's always things that need to be fixed. Start programs where you have the youth that can actually walk out of school and go do a part-time job for a couple hours.
Absolutely. I mean, Dan, you and I are tracking right along. These are just kind of things that I'm looking at, and like I said, as I began to run this race and start to ask the questions, and we start to try to figure out what it is that we could do better for Pensacola. I'm out there and I'm talking to various people. I would tell you that, I think that the city is artificially small and has been artificially small for years. And I think that at some point we need to talk about growing the city.
Absolutely. 95% of the people who call themselves Pensacolians don't live within the city limit, which is insane to me. And and they raise hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in tax dollars, and they are currently very, very underrepresented because they don't have a mayor representing them.
Yes, you know what I call it? I call it taxation without representation is what I call it. $896 million budget at this moment. Listen, I will tell you and I will tell everybody, this is not time for on-the-job training. You need people who actually know how an annual spend plan or a budget works and who've had executive level experience and know what needs to happen. Of course, we don't have one of our colleagues sitting here, Colonel Tracy McMillian right now, who's currently the Chief of Staff of the 103rd, but she'll be done come the 31st of December and will be able to join us, and I look forward to her joining us. So, like I said, these are ideas that I've got, Dan, and of course there are ideas that you've got, and as we sit down and we utilize a process called MDMP and we can figure out what needs to be done, we can staff things, we can mitigate the risk, and we can get it together before we present it. So let me ask you, so what do you know about emergency preparedness?
So not to toot our horn too much, but between the three of us, myself, Eric, and dear Tracy, we have over 100 years experience running entire theaters of war, some of them as large as 150,000 people, and getting the logistics, the transportation, the strategic transportation, integrating the not just the commerce, but the commodity management through countries that don't get along with each other and are often landlocked. We've some very, very, very difficult challenges. So there's a lot of different things erupt in these different theaters at different times. Some of them quite dangerous, and we are often required to change on a dime. And between the three of us, there's almost nothing we haven't seen and no catastrophe we haven't fixed.
Dan, look, you're right on the money, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I'm thinking to myself, look, I could not have gone on this adventure or taken on this adventure had I not known that there was you and Tracy and Wes standing by me. So that's reassuring to know that when you move into a position, someone's got your 3, your 6, and your 9, and we're not guessing. We know what to do. We've done disaster preparedness. We've done budget plans. We've prepared for war. We've done all kinds of things. We've done executive level work. So I will tell you that I'm of the opinion that in order to move Pensacola forward, it takes vision, it takes experience, it takes knowledge, and it takes leadership. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, those are things that we have. So that's pretty much the gist of kind of things that are kind of running off the top of my head. Is there anything that kind of, that pops into your mind as we're sitting here having this conversation? As we're down to the wire here.
Well, I like this direction because in order to make Pensacola successful, you need jobs, and you need good paying jobs, not just any job, not a service-oriented job, not a tourist job. You need a good industrial job that's going to remain and have staying power and be able to last through changes in the economy or events like a COVID. And right now, we need that. And by adding the education for vocational education, making the city more walkable and more integrated, integrating the commercial sections along with the living where people live, I think you'll be able to create a better, more integrated city and a lot more opportunity, and you will attract the companies and the corporations who want to put high-tech industry here, and we have ample space in this county to be able to do it and do it comfortably without interfering with our tourists.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dan, for coming in and speaking with me and allowing me to introduce you to Pensacola as a whole. I'm Colonel Eric W. Shorter. I'm running for mayor, and I humbly ask for your vote. I believe that we have the vision, we have the knowledge, we have the experience, and the leadership to move Pensacola in the right direction. I'm not saying that the current mayor hasn't done great things, but we will take it from here. Thank you.